Yeah, should we talk about the Southern Baptists? So, the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in the country, they just announced this week that they lost about a quarter million members over the past year. They release every year before their big general convention, their annual meeting, they release some statistics about how the Southern Baptists are doing. And when they released that information this year, they said, yeah, we're still losing a ton of members from what we compared to what we used to do. Let me show you the relevant line here because this is interesting. This is from Lifeway Research, which compiled all this information. Sorry, it's like covered up by these giant blocks of everything. But look at this. Membership declined for the 17th straight year, dropping below 13 million for the first time since the mid 1970s. However, the less than 2% decline was the smallest in recent years. Look at that last line again. Like, yeah, we lost members, but we're losing fewer than we used to. Yay. They're very excited that the decline is slower than it used to be. Like, it's never good when you have to brag about how your popularity is fading less quickly than it used to. But I can understand why they're happy about that because in 2020, the very same person who wrote this article, he wrote about how that year's data showed the largest single year drop in membership in more than 100 years. So, like, that guy's optimistic. But yeah, couldn't have happened to a nicer group of people, right? Here's the chart you actually might find interesting. This is their membership chart. It's like the greatest hockey stick you can imagine. But yeah, Southern Baptist Convention membership falls below 13 million. And a couple things of note here. The very top of this chart, that's coming around, I believe, 2000. That looks like 2008 or so. No, I'm sorry, 2003 is the peak. And in 2003, they had 16.3 million members. And now you could see falling, falling, falling. Now they're just under 13 million. And like they said, the last time they saw 13 million members, it's when the most famous member of their church was Jimmy Carter, and they were on an upswing. It was 13 million, and they were still growing. So very interesting to see that hockey stick chart. The other thing that's interesting about the press release they put out is they said, okay, we're losing all these members and that doesn't look great. However, we have more people getting baptized than, the past several years, and in-person church attendance also grew, which doesn't counteract the fact that fewer people want to be Southern Baptists overall. Like, it doesn't matter how many people get baptized if the cup is still leaking faster than you can refill it. And also, who cares if they get baptized? That's a metric literally no one outside the church cares about because it doesn't matter. I don't care if you say magic words and sprinkle some water or dip yourself in a pool. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. What matters is the membership, and the membership is still falling. As for the attendance, like, more people are now coming to church than or regularly attending church. Yeah, I mean, that's a function of the pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of people didn't go to church. Some of those churches shifted to online only services, like a lot of us had to for a lot of the things we do. And now more people are going back regularly if that's their thing. But who cares? Because again, those were always people who were in the fold. What's the bigger story is that, yeah, well, you're not winning over people who were iffy about you. Like, they're walking away. So again, you could blame some of that on the pandemic and the recovery. You can also blame the attendance, the membership numbers on older members dying out and then not getting replaced by younger ones. But one thing I did find interesting about this, because I've been following this story for a while, last year when they had the same story come out, this is what their executive director, Scott McConnell, said. He's the director of Lifeway Research, the people compiling the data. And look at what he said last year when they had like a record membership drop. Much of the downward movement we're seeing in membership reflects people who stopped participating in an individual congregation years ago, and the record keeping is finally catching up. See, a lot of people left church and we didn't record it because of the pandemic. But now we have a better sense of who's coming to church, who's leaving church. So we're updating all the numbers. That's why the membership numbers are dropping so much, everybody. Okay, I didn't really believe it when you said it last year, but it's been another year and the membership numbers are still falling. How long do you think it takes them to clean up the numbers? How long does it take them to admit maybe it's not record keeping that's the problem? Maybe paperwork isn't the thing they need to be worried about, right? Like, it's such a weird excuse to give. You know what they don't say in that Lifeway research report about membership drops? It doesn't say anything about how potential members of the Southern Baptist Convention may have been turned off by the SBC's pathetic attempts at dealing with its own sex abuse crisis, or how they downplayed sexual misconduct among former leaders, or how they punished churches for having women pastors, or how they basically pressured out all the black pastors. A lot of them have left anyway. They didn't mention that they lost a lot of prominent advocates because of their bigotry. They didn't mention anything about their anti LGBTQ policies. And if you were with me like a week or so ago, we talked about a different survey that asked people, why did you leave the faith of your childhood? And I think the number one reason was, well, I don't believe it anymore. Fine. But the number two reason is I was sick and tired of the way my childhood religion treated gay and lesbian people. And here's the Southern Baptist saying, yeah, how could that possibly be the issue? We're consistent in our bigotry, damn it. And then they're wondering why people don't show up anymore. The only time sexual abuse, by the way, came up in their entire survey was this passage right here. Let me share this with you. This is from the same Lifeway research report. This year, several state conventions also used the survey, sorry about that, to ask questions about sex abuse prevention and response. Oh, the survey asked about sex abuse prevention and response. And let's see what they learned. More than half of responding Southern Baptist affiliated congregations, 58%, say they require background checks for all staff and those who work with children and students. Oh my God. Only half of Southern Baptist congregations do background checks on the people in their churches who work with kids. Like, if you are at Subway, they will do a background check. If you're at a library or a daycare, they're going to do background checks. But apparently, if you're teaching Sunday school, half of Southern Baptist churches are like, I know you. You're probably fine. And like, you don't know that. You don't know what these people do behind closed doors. So that's freaky. And then fewer, say, staff and those working with young churchgoers have been trained in reporting sex abuse cases, only 38%, or caring for survivors of sexual abuse, 16%. So they don't do background checks on these people. Most of them don't know how to report sex abuse if they found out about it. And virtually all of them say, I don't actually know how to care for survivors of sexual abuse, which, by the way, in the Southern Baptist Convention seems like something everybody should be trained in because there are a lot of victims. So that is messed up. And they're bragging about this stuff. Like, I don't know why you'd want to join a church that says we don't do background checks. We're not going to comfort you. We don't know how to do that if you suffer any kind of sexual abuse. And like, I think the excuse some of them would give is we're a small church. We can't hire someone to take care of this for us. But like, then it's irresponsible to bring on staffers or volunteers to work with kids when you're not even going to do a cursory background check on them. At the very least, you got to create strict policies to minimize potential problems. But these numbers suggest that even training people to report abuse is not a high priority. And I find it funny that this comes like 2 weeks after the United Methodist Church voted to get rid of its anti-LGBTQ policies because they decided to allow gay clergy members, even married ones. And next month, though, the Southern Baptists are going to hold their annual meeting where they're going to basically vote on policies to become even more bigoted. So I don't know what they think they're going to accomplish. I don't know why they're bragging about the membership numbers when everything they are doing is only pushing more young people away. And all of this brought to mind for me about a year and a half ago, the newly elected president of the Southern Baptist Convention. His name is Bart Barber. He is still the president today. They're going to pick a new one in a month. Bart Barber appeared on 60 Minutes to talk about the sex abuse crisis and Southern Baptists. And like, he's a decent spokesperson, like a smiley kind of dude you want to hang out with. But even in that interview, he ended up saying that we should force children to have their rapists' babies because that's the compassionate thing to do. Because he believes fetuses matter more than women. He also said conversion therapy, which is dangerous and ineffective. He promoted conversion therapy for gay people. He also said people in a same-sex marriage could not be a good Christian. And he also denied the existence of trans people. And then he's like, oh, and I also voted for Donald Trump in 2020. That was the best person they had to speak in front of the cameras. Like, if that's the best you've got, I don't know why you're surprised the membership is dipping. Like, and I'm not even blaming one dude, even if he's the president of the organization, for why their numbers are falling. But when the chief representative of your religion, a guy who got praised for that interview, says, you know, my faith teaches me that Jesus is homophobic and transphobic, and God wants to further traumatize child victims of sexual assault. Oh, and by the way, the thrice married racist who paid hush money to a porn star he was having an affair with while his current wife was pregnant with their fifth child, and who also remains a threat to democracy, he can still get my vote in the future. How is that a winning pitch for anybody? Like, it's no wonder that so many young people are like, I might believe in God, but I do not want to believe in God with the rest of you people. That's why I don't feel any sympathy for this loss of membership. Like, they are losing members in the Southern Baptist Convention, but the rest of us as a society, we're not losing anything of value. The faster those remaining members get the hell out of there, the closer we get to a country where Southern Baptists do not have the sort of political power they have today. I want to show you one other thing that Lifeway Research also shared. Look at this chart right here, because this is their annual church profile statistical summary from last year. And look at this. Undesignated receipts. It's the third line right over here. And this says that in 2022, right above me right there, in 2022, how much money did the Southern Baptists take in? $9.96 billion. But if you look over here, how much did they make this past year? $10 billion. They lost 250,000 members, and they still came out with more money on the other side. So you know who doesn't care about the membership numbers dropping? Southern Baptists, because they got the thing that matters to them. They got the money. Who cares if you're dripping members? They'll survive. Like, and here's the thing. I don't think Southern Baptists are about to turn the tide. They're not going to become more popular in the future. I don't, and especially when it comes to like abortion rights and stuff, they're not getting more popular. And they are so dogmatic that they're not going to change their ways either. And I think it's good. People are starting to finally realize how damaging those beliefs are, and they're leaving. And maybe they're not leaving the faith altogether, but they are realizing their lives are perfectly fine without having to support churches that do more harm than good. I'm going to pause there. Let's take some other questions here while I remove a million tabs. What did I miss? So post 9/11 trauma in action, I guess. You'll have to explain that one to me, Joe. Do you mean post-pandemic trauma in action or post 9/11 trauma? I'm not sure what you're getting at. We'll come back to that in a second. What else we got? I wonder what happened in 2003. Let me go back to that chart here. Here we go. In 2003, which is right around where the dip begins, there's a handful of reasons that I could give you for what I think happened around 2003 when the Southern Baptists numbers right over there started to take a dive. Among other things, you have George W. Bush in office, and for those of you who are young, maybe you don't remember that time, but he is a guy who very much wore his religion on his sleeve, and he sucked. Like, he was bad with science, he was fighting an unnecessary war in Iraq. He was mishandling all the 9/11 goodwill. And people didn't like him. And if you don't like his politics, you probably also don't like the religious people who were supporting his politics. So that's one thing. You could also cite that people like the internet was around. People were starting to learn that there were alternatives out there, and you could walk away from organized religion. Other people had done it. They were alive. They were fine. God did not strike them dead. I also think, like, when you have the spread of Google and social media and you realize you can ask questions to people in the privacy of your own home and realize, oh, I'm not the weird one here. They're the weird ones. I think all of that stuff makes a difference. But like that chart that goes like this, trying to do this backwards here, the chart that goes like that, it's not just Southern Baptists. We could play this game for all of organized religion, because at that point it began dipping for everybody in the mid 2000s. And again, we could play a game of what all the reasons were that happened. But I think I mentioned some of the big ones. Also, the fact that you had more people out and proud about being atheists and criticizing people for religious stuff. I mean, abortion wasn't the issue at the time, but like stem cell research, that was a big deal. And George W. Bush was like, we're not going to do more research on this potentially huge thing because that's like killing a baby. It's like, that's not how it works. But also, who do you take your anger out on? The religion that taught him to do this stuff, and the people supporting him. What else? Just as I was referring to the peak. Thanks, Joe. Sorry about that. I realized we answered your question as we were getting to that question. So you were talking about the post 9/11 trauma, and that might be very well true. Like when you had like the biggest faith-based initiative in world history, the 9/11 attacks, um, people started to question like maybe faith is not a virtue. And that's not to dismiss the Islamophobia that happened after that either, but it's just saying maybe people who are saying, I'm going to do horrible things in the name of God, maybe we should walk away from all of that. So let's not discount that either. Thanks for bringing it up. One Baptist leader interviewed on Amanpour on CNN said that new members who identify as evangelicals largely aren't focused on the religion, and the conventions are becoming largely focused on politics. This is a fascinating topic because you're right about this. If you ask evangelicals, like honestly, these days, I'm making this up, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if you ask white evangelicals, white ones specifically, like what does it mean to be an evangelical? There used to be like a handful of things you had to believe in to be considered an evangelical. You had to believe that in the divinity of Jesus, that the only way to achieve salvation was through faith alone. It doesn't matter how good you are if you don't accept this stuff, like things like that. But if you ask them now about theology, they'll have very diverse views on theology. But the reason they call themselves evangelicals or Southern Baptists is because, like, oh, yeah, these are the mega people I like. That's why at all the political rallies, they're steeped in religious rhetoric. Like, you know who has to be mad about that? Pastors who care about the gospel, pastors who care about the Sermon on the Mount. They have to be the most mad at the fact that a lot of people see church as like an extension of the Republican Party. It's infuriating and it's dangerous for the rest of us too. But yeah, like this idea that a lot of people, why do you have a religious label these days? It's not because you happen to believe in the specifics. Like, good luck trying to figure out, if you ask random people, what's the difference between a Southern Baptist and a Methodist and a Presbyterian? They don't know. But if you say, oh, yeah, Christians, those are the ones who support Trump, they'll be like, oh, yeah, that's me. I'm going to be with them. So it is a scary thing that religious affiliation is really turning into a political affiliation instead. They should be using that money, the $10 billion, to feed the hungry and house the homeless. Where is all that money going? Among other things, they are giving some of it to churches to send people on mission trips. They're using it to, I'm sure, pay for a lot of the sex abuse settlements. I don't know. Churches take it's a good business to be in. Like if you can't do casinos, you might as well do religion. They make all that money. They're not paying it to the pastors necessarily. Not all of them are filthy rich at all. But again, some of it gets used for various mission driven things that is run by the Southern Baptist Convention. And they have a lot of staff and they got to pay off, church buildings. I don't know how it works, but I'm pretty sure a good chunk of that money is not going to feed the homeless.